Are we ready? All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:32 p.m. on this 14th of March, 2019.
Hi, Dave.
It is Pi Day. Slightly disappointed I didn't plan for it. I know. I had a brownie. I cranked it. Oh, it's happening. Here. Mr. Van Hoek.
Present.
Mr. Young. Ms. Walsh.
President.
Mr. Stitchett.
Present.
Mr. Linden. And Mr. Oswald for Mr. Hanson.
Here.
And Mr. Colby. Here. All right, so we do have a quorum. All right.
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. We have a business item on presentation by staff or consultant. The committee will then give you a chance to discuss the matter, and after that, the public will be invited.
All right. As always, the first thing before us is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
I second. Seconded by Ms. McMullen. Are there any opposed? That is approved. We do have one set of meeting minutes ahead of us from Valentine's Day a month ago. Joker. Second. By Ms. Atkins, seconded by Ms. Am I supposed to say are there any opposed or are there any objections? It's objections. I was just thinking of that as a Robert's Rules of Order. I had read it. Are there any objections? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Moving right along, we have our first action item before us is what most of the discussion was last time. Is the coordinated human services transportation plan.
You have the document that was here last month. You have an updated comment response summary. This time it is in order of pages, as opposed to person by person, as you flipping back and forth to page 2 and 1. So hopefully that makes it a little clearer. Staff did go through this and update it, make some typos, edits, etc., and make sure it was clear, and also came up with some different responses in some cases. So I think we're pretty pleased with that portion of the program.
Just that we went through, myself, Bart, Aaron, and Craig sat down and went through each comment. Like I said, reorganized it, made the administrative edits, addressed some of the concerns about some of the verbiage that may have came across as being a little inflammatory or flat out inaccurate. So we made those edits into the responses, and then we would just push this to the contractor as the document gets approved to have those changes made. You won't see the edits in the document right now. Edit will be in the comment response.
Got it. So it's still the same document you
Yes.
saw before?
Yeah, it did not touch the actual document.
Okay. Thank you, that was one of my questions.
Yes.
Are there any questions from the board?
Do comments to date get posted on the website as well?
So no additional comments outside of the staff edits that were made were posted. Not added any additional. It was more for clarification and administrative purposes at this point. So no changes or additional comments. Any other questions? Are there any questions or comments from the public at this time? Hearing none, the matter was committee.
So this is the one that, because it is not a required plan, it's already gone through its public, we are recommending approval to the policy committee.
It is a required plan, it's just not.
The amount of primary plan is, that's, yes. Okay.
Move to approve a transportation plan, or move to recommend approval of the coordinated transportation plan to policy committee.
Second.
All right, thank you. I know, exactly. Moved by Ms. Acton, seconded by Mr. Stitchik. I will get it.
Got it.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, we are so moved.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I should have mentioned this earlier, obviously, but Mr. Stitchik, Matt Stitchik with the Health Department is our new Health Department rep, replacing Ms. Fetco. He's been very active on the air quality side with AMATS for quite a while, so very, very familiar. He's done our interagency consultation, air quality conformity reports for a while, so he's well versed in that portion of the program. So he's now the official Anchorage Health Department rep for the committee.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I guess I should, yeah, I know, I should have said, I knew I saw the email from the end, so I knew. I guess I just assumed all of you learned through osmosis from me. I mean, that's what I try to. Yeah. But welcome. I know we've seen you in the room before, so I wrote your name down. For me, I'm the sort of person that wants to write it in my own hand and see it, it sticks. That's how I study before. So.
Congratulations. I have embarrassed myself 3 times.
All right, the next item before us is item 5B, the Spinard Corridor Plan.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yes, we will present on that. So we were here 2 months ago. We were trying to come forward in January with a revised plan and comment table, but there were some long-range planning comments that hadn't been addressed yet, so it got sent back. So we are back in front of you. I did have this plan and table ready 2 weeks ago and wanted to send it out. However, there was some, like I promised you I would last time, so I feel bad about that. I apologize. There was some concern with some of the TAC members that since we had a draft that was still being edited, we didn't want 2 drafts going at one time. So I apologize that you haven't seen it before last Thursday. I know some of you have. We really just want to make sure that the point of doing it was to make sure if you still had any heartburn with anything, let us know so that we could have it changed before today. But if you do have any heartburn with anything, or if something hasn't been changed to your specifications, we just want to let you know that we can continue to work on changing it for the draft that comes out. But we just really want to keep this moving forward since our deadline is June of the end of this year for completing the contract, and we have been getting asked by the public about it. So, and our mission was to address any major things you had that you absolutely didn't want the public to see, or that was rephrased. You didn't want to set expectations for the public that weren't realistic. That's what I wanted to say. Or correct, exactly. So we did our best to address those. Again, if something isn't, we apologize for not seeing it before last Thursday, but we can continue to work on that. And we're here to hear if you have further concerns, or if you're ready to release it so that we can do our open house and move forward with it.
And just a reminder, we're asking for a 60-day public comment, not our usual 30, so a little bit longer, a lot of opportunity to comment. So I think there'll be ample time for not only the public, but members of this committee and others to have a look at it and chew on it fairly well.
So, I do have a question.
Sure.
Because as far as the comments and like response to comments. I mean, we're not approving anything, we're releasing for public draft, so it's not the intent to go through the comments now, correct? I mean, it'd be go through comments once we do the public hearing comments.
Right, yeah.
And then we'll do that. It's just,
We call it a work session.
I would want that, yes, I know, most of it was my staff, it was John and Drew in the comment, yeah, but that began in October, so, yes. They reminded me, I was. Are there any other questions and comments from the committee?
I would just say from my perspective, a lot of the comments came out from my department, and so I've gone through that part specifically and feel very comfortable with how the that. So I have no problem moving this forward.
Mr. Benoit?
Yeah, from the DOT perspective, DOT still objects to releasing this plan. This plan still adversely impacts many of the state infrastructures. Northern Lights, Benson, Minnesota, and Tudor are adversely affected by this plan. There still has been very little coordination with DOT on how they would like to see any changes made. We don't feel our comments were taken seriously or referenced seriously in the current draft. So we do not recommend that this plan moves forward until it's better coordinated with DOT.
Can I ask a question? Or are there specific comments on here that you would like us to address?
Well, I mean, just more specific, as I said, you know, the specific adverse impacts to Northern Lights, Benson, Minnesota, and Tudor are extreme concern of ours. And without coordinating with us, you know, it's one of the things that's often said at the policy meeting, speaking as the director of DOT, when you're out talking to these, doing these corridor plans and talking to communities, you know, you may get information representing from a few people from the community. The DOT, as we often do, represent the thousands of people that use that corridor. And we're not trying to appease the few people that you get at your community meetings or from the community council. We're directly representing the thousands that we can show use this corridors or these corridors every day, and not listening to the thousands that are adversely impacted by some of the suggestions that you're making here. It is something we're not willing to start doing right now.
I apologize, I didn't have the benefit of being at that coordination meeting. Can you explain how the Spenard corridor plan interferes with DOT planning for the arterials, surrounding arterial roadways?
Yeah, whenever you're talking about reducing lanes or changing configurations of lanes or slowing down speed limits or anything like that at a DOT facility, that's something that basically violates our favorite mission, which is just the
Moving the
opposite.
traffic.
Right.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, so I mean, writ large, there are impacts at some of these major intersections, Minnesota, Tudor, Northern Lights. And they seem to have taken a bit of a myopic approach, and that it's a good thing for the Spenard corridor specifically, but the impact to the system in terms of level of service and capacity, speed, stuff like that. There's no. So you created this issue with regard to capacity or level of service, but there's no way there's nothing shown that mitigates that impact. So we don't know how looking down lanes at Minnesota Spenard or some of these other places, there's really been nothing done to say how are we going to offset that impact in other ways, maintaining the level of service that along the state roads.
If I can respond to that, I hear your comments. We certainly want to have you feel comfortable with the plan as it goes forward. I feel like there are specific comments in here that DOT gave us that we tried to respond to, which to our knowledge, we're addressing these concerns, but it seems that we have not responded to those correctly, so I'm just trying to get specific on what we need to do to have you be comfortable with the plan. There is, we are budget limited, are about $10,000 over budget at this point, given all of the internal review that our consultants have been responding to already. So, in a planning document, it's not, I mean, obviously it's not the same as a design document. It is overarching, it is visionary, so a lot of the things that we're saying in there are not, you know, we're going to do this, but just suggestive of things that could be done. So we are limited to what we can actually respond to as far as scope-wise, if we're suggesting a corridor needs to be traffic calmed or narrowed or whatever. So, so in order to move this plan forward, I guess my question is, what do you suggest that we do on our level as planners and have our consultants do? Because really we want to, the DOT on board, and we thought we responded to your concerns, but I'm not sure which ones we didn't respond to or not adequately. So if you could just clarify that for us and give us a way so that we can move forward, that's
I
what
don't
we'd
think
like to do.
I mean, you're responding to comments, but I don't think we've actually sat down at the table and said, okay, what are our constraints with regard to what is the state going to allow us to do at Minnesota's been our plus. And you've got a vision that you're articulating some changes there that are more accommodating to multimodal functions. But if the end result of that is a reduction in lane size, reductions in speeds, reductions in capacity or level of service, and for the department, that's a constraint. We can't move forward with unless there are ways to mitigate it. Then we can't implement it on our road within that system. And so what we don't want to do is find ourselves moving forward with a plan that sets false expectations about things that can be accomplished if we don't have everybody at the table agreeing that we move forward in these things with perhaps these types of mitigation events. This kind of came about at the MTP 2040 this last week, where, you know, if Seward Glen were made, then we could do lane reductions and other things. If it's not made, we can't end up breaking roadway systems and service and safety. So, again, it's everything is within a context of our road, within the context of a transportation network within the whole. And if you're going to change the flow or patterns or the way traffic moves or levels of service in one area, you've got to be able to somehow show how we're going to fix it. Make so that the department, which is, we're more about mobility, moving people and traffic safely from point A to point B, how we can do that. We're not necessarily development-centric. That's not our mission. Our mission is to move a lot of cars from point A to B and point B safely and efficiently. So anyway, I just don't think we've had that, getting sit down.
And we're happy to have that, and we're happy to get our consultants and Dean and myself and whoever else needs to be involved to sit down and have that. I guess in the spirit of moving the plan forward, do you think that's something that we could do? Because if maybe that was this in this table and we missed it, or is that something that we can do in the next 60 days to make you feel comfortable with the plan moving forward?
Certainly, I think within the next 30 days. But we need to sit down and talk it through.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, if there's anything that wasn't addressed to your satisfaction, we are happy to continue working on that and look forward to that. We definitely want DOT on board with this plan. But our contract expires in June, and if it's something that we can continue to work on as the plan continues to evolve, we prefer to do that rather than just to hold everything up until, we've addressed that. Obviously you're concerned, and if for some reason we have already stated that and that's in this table and we missed it, I say that's our fault, so we apologize.
I understand the schedule and your budgetary constraints.
Yeah.
But I think for us, that even if Todd and I disagree and everybody else agrees and that happens in the policy, we end up with a plan that if it ever came to Todd and I for implementation, we would deny the implementation. Now you have frustrated public people who are saying, "But we have this plan." So I think we just need to sit down and talk and work through some of these choke points.
We're happy to do that.
I think we can resolve the process.
Okay, we'll definitely happy to do that at your convenience, so just let us know.
Scott Thomas is a traffic engineer. He's a great person to start with. Him and Todd and his planning staff.
Okay.
Jamie, did you have a question?
Great.
I was just wondering if anything would happen if you had an additional 30 days to work on the plan and then release for 30? Was the plan released for 60 just for as much time as possible up with the public?
Yeah, we need to have an open house as part of our contract that's in our scope, as well as a couple more advisory group meetings. And so we're trying to get that open house in the public involvement, open day period, because we're going to be taking public comment during that open house, and then we're going to incorporate it afterwards. So,
I was just trying to get a feeling for your time.
Yeah.
Why
Wanted to give
60
enough
rather
time.
than the
right.
Community council.
So I'm definitely very aware of the community, very anxious to see this. And there's a lot of push to get this. I'm wondering, I know we said we couldn't look through the comments now, but if there was language, I'm wondering if your concern is that it gets released even though it's in draft form and you have a chance to relook at this, that there's going to be expectations put out there that you might not want. I'm curious if that is the case, if we are able to amend some of the responses, if there is some language in here that could be changed as far as changing from their suggestion to changing that would make me more comfortable that can engage that, I guess, out to make changes and address some of these very concerns.
Some kind of boilerplate language, something to the effect that pending Department of Transportation approval or depend,
The feasibility, I think it doesn't have to be wanting to do it or not, it's not can do it. I think that we also want to be clear that it's not an answer. Making sure it's feasible and
Well, they did sit down with us. Yeah, with the exception of one thing that I think might have slipped through the cracks. Pretty much, we worked with all the issues relatively well. And so from my perspective, if there's a way that you guys can talk to the next 30 days and put it out for 30 days and still make all your, I know you're trying to thread needles, right?
Yeah.
15 and 45.
Or 15 and 45, I think that's probably the most effective way to get through this.
And the reason also for 60 days was because, and why we're hesitant to do it before we get approval from this committee, because we did make that mistake earlier and our consultants had scheduled travel and they had to cancel it and that cost us some money. So we're just trying to avoid that.
Right, do we have the option of considering release in 15 days outside of the normal meeting to do it by email? Yep.
sit down in 2 weeks and what would be acceptable to the department.
So I had my staff go through and do a pretty thorough review of, because I know that they had some pretty major concerns the last time there was a work session. And if you sit down with DOT to have this discussion, I just asked that my staff be invited. I personally would be out of town for next Thursday. But the big concerns, we did have a specific comment in here that I was trying to find that I think the problem is there, previously the comments were that staff was unsure of what the comment was asking for and said that there needed to be follow-up, but there wasn't follow-up. So one of the comments that we're saying is that comment 122 was provided a comparison between the proposed redesign alternatives and the MTP and OSA plans to reduce vehicle lanes with a much bigger impact on the area-wide transportation system. So that comment was pretty much, was trying to get to what Todd was saying, that when you're taking a lane from Northern Lights or Benson, or you're recommending removal of lanes on Minnesota and constricting some of these major arterials, that traffic goes somewhere, really. And as we're going through the MTP, even when we're looking at a 5% mode shift, that's still not enough of a reduction to vehicular traffic that as we're doing that modeling, the transportation system, removal of lanes on those corridors will have an impact. It will go elsewhere and it will create a significant amount of congestion in certain areas. And we, as a state and as a city, get hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis from FHWA to mitigate congestion. That's what our CMAQ funding is for. I mean, it pays for multiple staff members on the traffic team. And so we have a concern really that, what's recommended in the plan actually, is going to have negative repercussions on the overall transportation system. And so our question was really, how does this plan compare to the other plans? Because the MVP has an idea of what the congestion in the transportation system needs to look like. How does that compare to what they're classified in the OS and HP and what their goals and their purposes are in roadways, and is it in conflict? And that one really is one that says no action was recommended and the comment wasn't understood. So, I mean, I think that is a big part of the conversation that DOT is having. So, I mean, I know that my staff, they actually said that they're very happy with a lot of the changes, and they thought the plan, they said they knew, a lot of the changes and the things that were made, and they did give a lot of kudos, but they still do have concerns with putting this forth in the public eye, because it does, I can't tell you how many times the draft DCM Chapter 5 that never ended up going anywhere ends up getting referenced because it was sent to the public, they saw it, and we've got people submit designs based upon a draft that was never ratified. It sets an expectation, and so there is a concern. So I just would ask that really, rather than trying to have you meet with multiple groups at once, it would probably be better just to have the two traffic teams meet together, because I think we have similar concerns.
Well, and then the other question is, if some of the changes that come from that affect other agencies like the railroad or whatnot, is that a worry? M&E or whoever else? Do we have to see it again, or are we good? I mean,
My stuff's relatively.
you don't think it'll change by whatever you do?
Most of our issues have to do with the correlated DOT process because of walking his path there or not there doesn't affect them one way or the other except at the crossing.
Okay, and then the Freight Advisory Committee also sees this?
Right.
I think they're part of
Weighs in on it?
public, when it gets to that public review, they're part of that public review.
Okay, because while this doesn't take people to the port or out of the port, a bunch of the traffic that comes out of the port is a freight route in Minnesota. So some of the things, and so in that case, we're more aligned with DOT, keep that traffic moving. And we'll figure we'll take the back way into the market. But,
Yeah. Well, that was also a comment that we made, this plan doesn't address how the recommendation is going back to work, because of great operations in the area. So, I mean.
So I guess I'm fine with, like I said, it sounds like our goals are aligned with traffic. So I don't need to be at the meeting. And I'm willing to say, let's keep this one moving in 15 or 45, whatever, and trust me.
We got a picture of David Thompson.
There you go. What would David
So, John Cecil representing the Freight Advisory Committee. They have been made aware of the plan, and in the meantime, the staff has started to prepare some of the concerns from a freight perspective. So that was going to be submitted once the public comment period is initiated. And expecting some comments from the freight folks too, because there are impacts to the freight system.
So, Joni, does your consultant need to be here when we go through this, or is this something we can work through with you and staff?
We can do it, just the two of us, if you'd like, and then we met with Brian, our consultant wasn't there. If you'd like a consultant present, we can have them present too.
I was just asking.
Or I mean, on the phone anyway.
Yeah, whatever works, whatever's most efficient, cost effective.
Sure, absolutely. We can have Nori come in when we meet with you. Yeah. Great. And it really helps us, implementation-wise, to have all of the agencies have this look and, have your buy-in at this level. It's helpful, so thank you.
Are there any
I got a question on it. I'm looking at it, just kind of comparing it to my Midtown project on 32nd, 33rd. In your connection that you showed between Hardwick and Bernard, we can't make that work because of the lack of right-of-way, and we'll never get funding by houses and all that, so we're jogging a block. And I think you guys are aware, you've seen the plan that we're doing it. So to modify your plan or to amend or as needed as we go through and develop in those areas, how much of a problem is that going to be as we move forward once this is implemented?
Well, as we move forward with the public involvement, releasing the plan to the public, we are still taking all comments and continue to revise the plan. So we have
Our hope
suggestions.
is to have this match yours. This came out ahead of yours. So they don't reflect, this doesn't reflect the new findings from your project.
I don't think this is going to impact we're going to build next year. We expect to build that portion of next year. I think we'll be ahead of you, but that just suggests to me that you don't have enough detail for each of the corridors you're showing to know that it can or cannot be built for appropriate financing.
That could be a
It's very
comment
good.
taken and changed in the document. Those alignments are conceptual.
Yeah.
And this plan started.
I'm just making sure of that going forward.
Key in my eye has always been documentation, because there were certain projects that were proposed both in the bicycle plan and the pedestrian plan, that as we started ground truthing them and moving forward, we found that either for utility relocation purposes or right-of-way purposes, we couldn't follow the exact alignment that was proposed in the bike ped plan.
We're getting awfully close,
Really,
but
we
we can't do
documented it
that.
and really explained why we were veering from the adopted plan. It's not that we were completely ignoring the plan, it's just that as we got into the actual feasibility analysis of it, we weren't able to move forward with that, and so we had to do an alternative. Perfect example right now is the path that's actually going down Mountain View Drive. Originally, the plans were to put bike lanes on Mountain View Drive for a short section, but the right-of-way acquisition necessary to do so and the alignment of curb lines, it's just monumental. And so instead of widening or improving an existing trail, we try to improve the service of it, and it's been documented in that DSR. I mean, as to why it's varying from the adopted plan. I mean, I'd still make the copies of them so it kind of matches what we know we're moving forward with, but yeah.
A lot of what Todd and I do is very data-driven, it's very requirements-driven. These are a little more on the nice-to-have side. When we're having to make the case to the feds for an authority and necessity to condemn property, nice-to-haves don't really makes that a real tough discussion. So if I can't get the authority to condemn, I absolutely have to have your property, your 10 feet of development, whatever it is, to accommodate the additional pedestrian areas or bike lanes. That becomes a thing we execute or to think about. And those are some of the things that we talk about.
Don't you need to say exercise eminent domain instead of condemn?
I've been told by the lawyers I shouldn't say that.
Actually, it's acquisition. It still is acquisition through eminent domains, because you're still paying fair market value. It's never taking. You don't like using the word taking. It is an acquisition. So.
Keeping us correct.
Yeah. Yeah. We're being taught well by lawyers, aren't we, everybody? The correct terminology. Are there any other questions or comments?
For me, we really appreciate the staff and taking the time to look over the plan. I know it's big and you're very busy people, so thank you.
Are there any public questions or comments at this time? You look like you're biting your tongue, James.
That would be on.
Okay.
I'm sort of curious how the food desert issue would be handled in Spenard. I don't really know where there's an opportunity to locate a serious grocery market.
You mean outside of cars or village?
Yes. Out, like closer to the southern end of Spenard and international area where there's lower income housing where people don't have a store within walking distance. Has that been addressed anywhere in this plan?
Did you say the food truck?
I called it a food desert. The availability to local fresh food in walking or at least transportation network.
I don't recall.
Feasibility.
I don't recall exactly. We do discuss livability aspects in the plan, so I have to double check and see where those are, but it's probably in that section. And we do a transportation oriented development. We've got that quarter-mile radius that we look at, the corridor. So, and part of that assessment of finding out, what is needed to serve a trend-oriented development corridor is that access to food, fresh food and grocery stores in particular. So, I know it was looked at on a certain level, but I'll get back to you on.
I didn't say, I think that sort of, I'm responding on behalf of my planning department, I'm sorry, but usually I say that sort of thing is usually looked at the neighborhood plan, where
Yeah.
this is a corridor plan.
Right.
And so it's specifically more focusing on the transportation corridor and kind of the connections to it, and not so much like, the actual district neighborhood plan that usually looks at that.
Would there be an incorporation of more bus stops or at least safe bus pullouts to provide frequent bus service in that area?
I
Yes.
think that's the intent. I think that's the intent, yes, that's what the plan is. Yes.
Does it improve the transportation network so that people can get to fresh food easily
Yeah.
when they don't have a car?
Clarify, it's definitely correct. It is, but this is a little bit different than as a land use and transportation and specifically addressing oriented design, so. The intent is to improve those things, so this would actually be a good plan to identify maybe some potential locations.
It does. There's
Okay.
2 new locations for
Okay.
local commercial, local grocery recommended. One on Spinard and one on Tudor. So the idea would be that could serve as a local grocery store. Access to the neighborhood.
I know it was recommended for the south portion of
Yeah.
Sinar as well, because that area is lacking in grocery services.
Everything south of 36th Avenue is pretty much
Desert.
That's what we show.
outside of a walking area of choices.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the public before the matter live tonight? All right.
Question? Yes. So if we're to release, the action requested is to release the attached plan for 60-day public comment period. And it sounds like we're leaning towards releasing it for a 45-day public comment period following the 15-day final resolution period.
Collaboration.
I know,
Collaboration.
collaboration with agencies that
Yeah.
have to resolve. And when we're doing that, we're trusting that agency to not make changes so big that it changes everybody else's stuff.
Yes,
That's what we're looking at.
that's the risk.
And can we do that? Can we say we're gonna make some more changes and then before the group meets again, we're gonna release it?
Well, we can, once the group, whoever that we coordinate with, meets and hashes things out, they can get a report back, and if it seems like things are okay, then we can vote via email to release it for 45 days.
We can vote by email?
How does that affect the policy committee, because aren't they supposed to meet next week?
2 weeks.
So that would give us enough time to resolve that, have that electronic
we-
vote,
the-
so that it doesn't, they can move it forward?
The idea was for the TAC to release it today.
To the
So-
public
We can
comment.
release it for public
So we can
comment.
release it for public comment. The policy
Yeah.
committee
Yeah.
doesn't have to.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're not dependent on them right now.
okay.
And 60 days is a nice to have, it's not a requirement. 30 days is the requirement.
Yeah, it's not a requirement, but we do need to hold that open house, and it's nice to have at least a month before an open house to send flyers out to get the public to know about it,
Is 45 days sufficient with?
I think we can do 45 days. Yeah, our main thing too was scheduling our consultants to come with travel and everything before we actually knew if we were going to move forward. So, but yeah, we can make it work 45 days, I think. Hopefully.
You like a motion?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move that the Technical Advisory Committee releases the attached Spenard Corridor Plan for a 45-day public comment period following a 15-day final collaboration period with primarily DOT, PF, and traffic.
I second.
Moved by Ms. Walsh, second by Ms. McNulty. Are there any objections?
Make the friendly amendment pending positive feedback from the DOT that their concerns have been addressed.
I think it requires, this one would require, we're making the motion right now, it wouldn't require a follow-up vote.
We can do amendment to the vote if you want to.
Friendly amendment, if I and the second accept it, then we'll keep going.
Okay.
Let's do.
I'll accept that.
Okay.
What was that? I'll still second. You're still second.
Okay. Are there any objections to the motion with the friendly amendment? All right. Hearing none, we are so moved.
Who's the point of contact for you guys?
Scott Thomas made most of those comments.
Yeah, would you?
Scott Thomas would be the primary contact.
We will follow up with him.
I'd say
at the
John,
very latest tomorrow.
coordinate with John.
And John.
John Krause, he's
Okay.
going to be acting for me, and him and Chris Lynn are the ones who made comments, so we're coordinating with John.
Sounds good.
Scott's happy with it.
Listen, we love Scott too.
That's what we want.
Whatever we have.
All right. The next item before us, item 5C, is AMATS CAC Resolution 001-2019 artillery road reconstruction.
So these next two items, we had a discussion at our last city budget committee meeting. They had a couple of recommendations that grew out of the, what is that project called, TAC?
Integrated Corridor Management.
Yeah, Integrated Corridor Management Study that was done just recently. And so they had some recommendations they needed or asked to bubble up through this committee, obviously. So Aaron, you want to, since Aaron manages that committee for that AMATS, you could clarify that for them?
Hello, I'm Aaron Young-Nealon. I'm the AMATS planner at AMATS. I'm actually talking to you guys about something that's not MTP related. I'm just going to move beyond that, like, slip up, just ignore it.
In his head.
So the first resolution is regarding the Glen Highway Artillery Interchange reconstruction. So the committee felt that this was a pretty big priority for future funding. So they wanted to try and get something out there that was sent from the policy committee to DOT that just is asking that as future funding comes online in the STIP, they think about adding the artillery road interchange as kind of the #1 priority for that funding. And it was recognized that DOT is working on a PEL for the Artillery and Highland interchanges right now. So the thought is, as that gets done, it kind of will illuminate what can be done at those interchanges and then kind of try and bubble those to the top.
Questions? Mr. Young?
No, from the department's perspective, the ICM has prioritized some of these things. We absolutely concur with them being top priority projects. Everybody saw the Glen get shut down a year ago when the bridge got wet. It's one of the long-term things that fixes them. We certainly can use all the help we can get in advocating for putting that in the STIP as a high priority.
And I'll add on to that is, another comment, not a question. DOT planning took this as one of the priority projects for the last Amendment 3 to the STIP. It scored very high. We recommended that this project move on, and we tried to get Phase 2 funding in the STIP to follow on after the PEL. We don't know where that process is right now. Right now, Amendment 3 is kind of on hold, but it is, just let everybody know, we, as Wolfgang said, we do support this project. strongly, and we are also advocating to headquarters that this get added to the STIP.
Basically, the committee's understanding is this project is so large, it just, we could not fund it in the AMATS allocation. We could use our funds for this project, but the dollar figure is such that it would take up our entire allocation for years. So the request is for the policy committee to send a letter to DOT saying, we recognize it as a big priority and we want to support it. It's not something that's going to be funded out of the AMATS allocation, but we want to express the desire to really move that thing forward.
And is that, my question, does that apply to both of these? This is both artillery interchange and the free merge?
Well,
No. It's a separate,
Yeah.
it's a separate thing we can get to is the next.
All right, sorry,
yeah.
that's fine, I'm not
Yeah.
meshing since we just saw
Yeah.
that. So specifically this one, specifically
Yes.
the artillery road interchange?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of my comments are the same for that one.
Okay. So there is a bit of meshing,
Yeah,
okay. All right, are there any other questions from the committee on the artillery road? Yes.
I guess I'm confused how a project can be included in the STIP without a funding mechanism or source identified. I thought the two go together.
It is a funding.
Yeah, the STIP is a funding mechanism, so once we recognize, once the process is similar to the
Okay.
TIP now where we have on the NHS system where we score and rank projects, and once
Right.
they're scored and ranked at above a sufficient level, they're added to the STIP and funding is applied to it.
So if it's ranked number 3 on the STIP or number 3 priority, and it eats up all the available budget, does that mean everything 4 beyond is, I mean, is
Yes.
there enough flexibility that, no?
Yeah, basically, it's not a number of priorities, it's usually a funding limit. So if we say we have $150 million, we start going down the score until we
Okay,
get to
so you-
150, and everything below that stops. Yep.
Kind of like AMATS.
Yeah, it's kind of like us.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you went through and you ranked this, and you actually recommended amending the STIP to include this. So that would pull funding away from something else that's already in the STIP, potentially.
Potentially, or use future funding. I mean, you know, we have discretionary, not discretion, we have discretion to reorganize the STIP well, we're trying to do like 3 times a year amendments, and every time you do an amendment, you could displace projects with higher needed projects. Or, you know, you finish projects. There's a multitude of ways to manipulate the STIP and where you find more money, whether it's project closeouts, other things that you didn't recognize. And so you have this, when we have a STIP meeting for whether it's a new STIP or amendment, we know going into that meeting about what the threshold for dollars we have to spend, and then that's where we're working with.
Is it possible to recommend it in a phased implementation that would not sink the budget for all the other projects in the STIP?
Most of the projects are phased in some
Right.
phase or another.
Right, but I guess what I mean is to limit the number of dollars that could potentially go to this one aspect of the STIP per cycle, per iteration of the STIP.
So, as mentioned earlier, this being too big of a project for the TIP, it's not a big project for the STIP. We have $300, $400 million projects in the STIP frequently, $100 million projects.
So it's just
regardless
the
of what this
AMATS
project-
budget that gets consumed. There's
Significantly
plenty of
different.
state funding that allows the rest of the STIP to be implemented. Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? And I guess this is, reading this is just, you know, asking the policy committee to kind of say we support this being a high priority from AMATS. And it would end up being, I mean, no matter what, anything happens, the STIP goes through the whole STIP review process over at DOT. And more than likely, like you said, you're usually, it's design funding, the right-of-way utility funding, then construction funding, and it gets broken down into the basis of the project anyways. So it's not all one big hit.
Right, but it does sound like it potentially wipes out any possibility of doing bike transportation, multimodal, any
I don't know if it would pull away from that table.
Different pots of money.
Different pots
Oh,
of money.
okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, different
All right.
pots.
Just stick with the ones
Okay, I didn't understand that. So it's not just ranking alone that decides what moves forward, it's ranking at
This
per-
particular
per
project,
fund.
we're ranking among NHS projects.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from the public on this item? Matter left committee.
To approve the recommendation, forward up to the policy.
Second.
Are there any objections? The next item before us is the AMATS CAC Resolution 002, 2019, three-way on-ramp merge upgrades.
So Aaron again. So this is another one that came from the CAC regarding the ICM study. This is about some on-ramp merge upgrades at various interchanges on the Glen Highway. It was a pretty highly recommended project in the ICM study. This one, however, is a little bit different than the last one because the CAC is recommending that the policy committee add this project into the current TIP. Because the funding's a little bit different. It's only about 7.2 million for this project. Sorry, in the grand scheme of things, it's a tiny drop in the bucket. And so it's something that's manageable by the TIP. And so they were recommending it. However, please be aware that adding a new project to the current existing TIP is a major amendment, which is a 6 to 8 month process. So just heads up that if this is moved forward, it would not be in 2019, it would be 2020 later, because we're almost done with 2019 at this point.
In addition, putting a $7 million project in the TIP requires a $7 million worth of projects to come out. So some project that's in there right now would have to come out, or some projects would have to come out in order to add this in. It's just that's what happens. Good, better, and different.
I think it's a further clarification because this is all highway stuff. What are they asking? I just see on-ramp.
What is the project asking?
Yeah, what is actually?
It's going to be extending the merge ramps as you're getting onto the highway at various interchanges, because they're right now too short.
All of them?
Not all. I don't know if it's every single one of
Well, that's the
them,
question I had. I mean,
but a number of them. It's outlined in the ICM study. There were just too many to
There were
put in
11
the resolution.
11 locations there.
It was a good number of them, and it's basically going to extend the on-ramps to make it easier for people to merge onto the highway.
So they can get up to the highway speed.
Yeah.
I think
So the
enough.
So it's like
the quicker
Texas.
they merge angle, the more accidents, right? The less time you
Well, I
have to
was gonna say,
merge.
just make it
The
like
more
Texas.
shallow and the extended weave lanes makes it a safer.
Is this also, I thought I'd heard that part of this project also was some of those on and off ramps are just wide enough to be almost 2 lanes in the case of an emergency, and there's a potential of widening some of them to make it so that if there is an issue that you actually have the space? Or is that not part of this? Okay.
I think it would be looked at, but I don't know if it was necessarily guaranteeing that is happening at all of them.
Okay, well, I know in talking with Scott, that was one of the issues when we have those closures, is when we're like a guardrail and we have barely enough space with our barriers and barricades and everything to make it 2 lanes if we have the need for a bypass, but that was, I didn't know if that was one of the things that was discussed in this, so.
Reduce the strike distance.
You can, but to a certain.
Do we have data, crash data that would suggest that this is a significant, be no significant issue as far as crashes on the road?
I don't know.
Because for us to just willy-nilly throw it out because this is perceived, but we don't have any data to back it up.
I can respond to that. It actually does have data to back it up in the ICM project that there is a number of accidents. Is it the most important one on the Glen Highway? No. But the CAC felt that this was one that was fundable by the AMATS TIP. Because all the other ones were $30 to $120 million plus.
Well, we've got 100 projects that are funded with a tip, not just we don't have the money to fund them all. So I'm trying to figure out what, to use their parlance, what is this important enough to throw $7 million at something else that also is very important to this?
As part of their analysis, did they provide any of that detail when they offer up any of the projects that have they submitted other projects that are part of the adopt step? And if so, did they recommend any that this could be placed?
They meaning the CAC?
Yeah.
I don't remember them making any recommendations for what it would replace.
So, follow-up question. When did this ICM, when was it completed?
I guess you guys will have to help if it's actually approved.
There's 2 phases, actually. Phase 2 was actually presented to the legislature in January.
So this is a recent, this
Yeah.
is
Yes,
recent,
very.
all of this is recent,
Very.
okay,
Yes,
so
this is all
that's,
recent.
because the question I have is, rather than just saying recommending adding it to the tip, the question is whether or not, because this is a recently completed plan that had recommendations, whether those projects should be scored and ranked with the other tip projects to see if it falls within the top ranked priorities that were in the tip. And that, I'm just thinking of, like, if I'm gonna say that I don't agree with just saying it needs to be added to the tip, what is my alternative? It should be scored and ranked, generally, the way the
Yeah, that's
others are
kinda what
scored and
I-
ranked.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's usually the process, is if we're gonna add a project, and this is a newer project. I mean, but it's still the process of having to consider it to rank it, so. Okay.
You had something?
You had
Well,
a-
I was just curious, how many on-ramps are we talking here that are consuming the 7 million? And do we have a ranking of which are the most dangerous? Is it possible to implement it in a lesser but more targeted, lower dollar amount?
It's a good question. Yeah.
And what you just said about scoring brings up an important point. There's a little bit of precedent here.
Yeah.
You know, the CAC has its meetings, I want my project, by God, and I go and I lobby them, sure, you know, we'll make them put it in the front spot. It really does kind of open the door for that kind of thing. Get the CIC to endorse your project and they'll put it right in the front of the list. Not, I mean, I think the CIC is important and necessary, but we have to keep the process in mind.
Yes, I mean, and, well, the one thing we have going for us is the chair, well, is Cindy the chair? No, Cindy's not the chair. But Cindy Howell, who sits on the policy committee, is very much about process. I mean, as far as that go, I mean, and that's the point, is that there's processes to most of these planning programs. I mean, and how projects are scored, ranked, and then when they're not followed, I mean, that is an issue, because there is the public expectation that when the TIP and the STIP go through the public process of saying these are the projects on the list, to just come up with a new project and shove it in without having that comparison and evaluation. I agree with you. I think it's precedent setting. So while I'm okay with the previous one kind of recommending saying, yes, we think this is high priority, you should consider it for inclusion, we can't really direct anything in this tip. This is actually trying to direct a change in the tip. So
That's our plan.
yeah.
I guess since there is data, I'm not sure why the answer isn't HSIP eligible.
That's kind of where I'm at.
And so if it is, then it takes it out of the TIP construct, which is a different question. And
Shouldn't we know what's going to be bumped out?
Well, that's probably
Since the state's a higher priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they're saying if we score it, then we have some way to compare it.
Yeah.
so I'm not sure if the CDC asked that question. The difference is HSIP eligible.
They probably don't know enough to ask that question.
Generally, if it's data driven, that's what HSIP is all about, right? It's all about data driven action.
Data next.
Yeah. So if we really have the data, it should be HSIP eligible.
So I guess the question is, what do we do with
I might recommend
Remand
it,
back?
go back for consideration and see if it can be included in the HSIP before it's.
I mean, the only thing is the HSIP program, according to Scott, is pretty much gone for the next, pretty much end of time.
Next 3 years.
Yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah.
I mean, the realistic amount of time is it is pretty book solid with a lot of stuff that has data that shows that it's a higher need on that list of things.
Well, right now, it's bookmarked with a lot of interchange projects that may or may not have more data than this does. And the restacks happen at the HSIP level too, based on data-driven projects. So if we include this one and it beat out interchange here or in Fairbanks or wherever, then that interchange gets pushed out.
how would this project normally get in queue for the full ranking procedure?
Scott Thomas kind of heads the HSIP program for our region.
Well,
And he would-
even if it's not HSIP
It's not
funding, right
HSIP.
now, we're contemplating.
If it were in the tip, it would be nominated, we could call for nominations, it'd be ranked and scored. It would bubble up to the committee and they would, say yea or nay, and then it would go to the policy committee for approval.
Could
But we
we,
just finished that, we just adopted the new tip.
Yeah.
A month
Yeah.
or two ago, so.
could we ask that they consider it to be an HSIP, and if not, they put forward a nomination so we can actually have all the information?
Next time,
And
in the
then,
next cycle.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have enough information in the ICN. It has several pages worth of discussion on it. Talks about which exact ramps and all that sort of stuff, but, it's up, the committee is, if you want us to rank and score it, we can do that. If you want, send it back to them and have them, think about it a little longer, or staff is happy to do whatever it has to do.
Any other questions before I open it for public comment? Are there any public comments at this time?
James Starzyk, DOT Planning. I'm just curious, is this an action that the policy committee has taken on projects before, or would this be precedent setting as you had indicated?
Which action?
To have the policy committee request a project be added to the TIP?
From the CAC, from a single request?
I think we may have had something like it bubble up from the bike and ped and maybe freight. I'm not sure. I don't remember for certain, but the policy committee was very clear in the past. Any recommendations like this for many of our advisory committees has to come to the technical advisory committee. That's what they're expecting those committees to. That's part of why they exist, to make recommendations, but they have to come to the technical committee.
I think I would have to echo your concerns that this kind of creates a new process for projects to be inserted into a TIP that circumvents some fairly well thought out and well designed planning processes. So I would be highly cautious in taking on this concept.
Any other comments?
I'll just make it really clear. Our policies and procedures and operating agreement actually talk about if something like this happens, that if a project comes along, it can be nominated at any time and then can be dealt with at that time. So just so you know, it's not out of the blue of something like this happening in the past. It's just, what does it mean for future ones? But then the big question comes along is if at any point there's a hole in the tip, do you want to have stuff kind of in the queue that can help fill that hole if something were to come along? So that's something to think about as well.
And we do have a very clear procedure laid out for how you do amendments to the TIP if you want to add a project or delete a project later. So, there's a process in place, we wouldn't just add it in, but it does not happen very often to do amendments to the TIP. We do administrative modifications of smaller projects or smaller changes.
And I get what you're saying, is that there's a major pull. For example, when a bridge gets hit and you have a bridge go out, and then all of a sudden you do have a project that needs to be moved forward, there are processes to be able to do that. And I get that when you have those things bubble to the surface. I guess my concern with the language here is just as to add it to this tip. It doesn't say to rank it, to do the evaluation. It is a new project, it has newly been identified, and not saying that it's not a high priority, but the current tip has already gone through that process, that I think it needs to be adequately compared to its peers, and go through that process. So I guess that's where I'm kind of having to rub with the language, is I don't think there's a problem with saying we should score and evaluate this to see if it rises to the level of being added to the tip.
And I think in this case, it's just the fact that the CAC, they may not be completely aware of how the process works.
Yeah.
And so they're just saying, hey, we think this is very important. It was in just a very recently completed AMATS-funded plan, so, and that went through a vast public process, and this is it ranked fairly well in that as a high priority. Can you look at this and see if you can add it in? They don't know the process for adding things in, so.
One more question. So why did it not show up during call for nomination?
We called for nominations about a year ago.
So, yeah, and this.
And the study was still underway and hadn't been
Yeah.
identified as a particular project.
So it could be considered early for the
Right.
next term.
Oh, yeah, I mean, when we, the process for doing the nominations is, we get nominations, but then we also look at the projects that are in the MTP, we look at the projects that are in all the non-motorized plans that we have, we look at the freight mobility study, we look at any plans that we've done recently, and look at all the implementation parts of them, pull them out, rank and score them.
So the
So
next time-
this would, regardless, this would get looked at the next tip.
Any other public comment? All right, hearing none, the matter lies with the committee.
Real quick, Aaron, on that data, were those just side swipes or were there fatalities?
I'm not sure.
Does side swipes take a lot of, to make it just like
I don't think they were fatalities.
okay. And that could be a possible reason. Might not do very well to use just like so. But if we want to remain clean in the process and not open up the floodgates to this happening over and over and over again, maybe we just say, hey, next step is 4 years.
Question? So the CAC is supported by staff or?
Yes.
Okay. So, I have a motion. That's my motion.
Okay.
So I move that the advisory committee request staff to take this back to the CAC and further explain the TIP process, the committee's, the TAC's concerns about the way this was brought forward outside of process and assist in getting into the process. That makes sense.
Process for ranking and scoring.
Right. The TIP process. If someone has cleaner language, go for it.
And maybe
Oh,
plus-
I guess my question would be, could staff advise, I mean.
I need a second for it.
It's
We don't
true,
discuss it.
sorry, yeah, so that's moved. We have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. I guess my question for staff, I know this is discussion after this, whether the CAC would be opposed to modifying the language to kind of say that it would be ranked and follow the TIP process rather, I mean, right now, just the way it reads, it just says add it to this TIP. It doesn't say following the standard TIP process sort of thing. And is that what you were trying to get?
Yes.
I mean, is that the staff, I mean, how that, and if so, I mean, if the CAC is that's what their intent was and that's how they wanted to go, just update that language and bring it back to us. So that was.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Like I said, if there's more clear language,
They're requesting this be added during a major amendment.
Yes.
So, you know,
Yeah.
we could say, yeah, sure, if then we do a major amendment, we'll consider it.
Consider it not necessarily added.
I mean, how often do we do a major amendment, though? You know, kind of the point.
Very rarely.
Exactly.
In the past, very rarely. That may change.
Well, it's just a challenging, very long process, so it's got to be really a big change or very important for us to want to make something that drastic.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Count for clarification. Are there any objections to that motion? All right. Thank you, everybody. That's the remainder of the business items. So now we are moving on to the project plan updates, and we have an update on the 2040 ACP.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This Monday, we had a work session with the committees, with the TAC and the Policy Committee and the Citizens Advisory Committee, and many of you attended, and we really appreciate that. The room was full, so it was great. we attempted to bring everybody up to speed very quickly with where we've been in the process since we have brought this to any of the committees. And we dove right into the fiscally constrained MTP and what are we going to put in the preferred alternative. And I think people just weren't quite ready for that yet. I think we should have taken more time explaining how we had come to this point and how we have involved the public. We did put out the draft scenarios to the public in March. In May, we got approval to model those alternatives. And we did get the modeling done, and we really there was nothing to see because everything was great. But that included like the Sewer to Glen Highway project and every project basically from the list that we had put out to the public. So every project on this list. So really, it didn't really tell us anything. Just that if we did all these things and we had all the money in the world, it would be great. So really, we were doing what MTP had done in the past, from looking at past RFPs and scopes of work for proposal. We did the same process, but somehow it didn't work this time because we presented scenarios. And that introduced another level of modeling that we're probably going to have to do. So we're going to be modeling the staff draft that we presented, which, by the way, does not include the Glen to Seward Highway project yet in the long term. But we acknowledge that it's a very important project and probably in part needs to be moved up to the long term. And there are some projects in the long term that probably should be moved out to make room for that because, as you discussed today, for the Spinard project, there are some in there that probably should not be done before that project is done. So that's a whole larger conversation that has to take place at the next work session. And we're going to be scheduling the work session. Craig is going to be, we should get the model results by March 22nd. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to release this to the public in April as we had hoped. But we'd rather get this right than try to rush it and make everybody mad at us. So that's our process. And we are following our public process too. We have a public involvement plan. And I know there was a conversation about our process. Cindy Heidel mentioned some things, but so the Citizens Advisory Committee, we're bringing them along at this point to be our citizens outreach at this level, right? This is not the point where we want to go out to the public, where we want to ask them to tell us what projects we're going to put in the short term and the long term. We have to prepare something that everybody's comfortable with and put it out there for them to react to, right? We are going to be putting it out for public review, but it's too early to do that. And for the last MTP, certainly it wasn't the policy committee that really said it was the TAC. And all of those conversations were even at the technical advisory committee level. So we'll get there, we're just not there yet. Does anybody have any questions about that meeting and what we're doing? Because I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable about what we're doing, that we're not being transparent. We probably should have kept you all in the loop on that piece, on the modeling piece, but we got into the financial planning assumption work that had to be done. We've been constantly working since May of last year, and that just seems such a long time to not have brought you all along with what we were doing with the modeling and developing the preferred alternative and everything. And we kind of put it together, and it seemed like it happened really fast. But really, we've had method to what we've been doing. So.
I don't think the process by which you're doing it is wrong. I don't think the information, I mean, really, what you're telling us and what I got out of that whole meeting was we have some hard decisions to make. Because like you said, if we could build all the projects we wanted to build, we had all the money in the world. Everything was great. And then you have reality of what your budgets are and what you can actually construct, and then what that results in as far as operations go, and having to do that evaluation. So we're just in the, I want to travel the world for 360 days straight, but I can only afford to go for 2 weeks. So
I want to do that.
I know, exactly. So, yeah. No, I definitely, I mean, and I think that what you gave us gave a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot to mull over. So I think the next, I guess I foresee the next work session being a bit more, a bit more productive, just because we're going to have a little bit more time to chew on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That puts my mind at ease. I was afraid that we really missed a step with you all, you know, but I appreciate
This
that.
unfortunately may not be a no work session. I have some comments though. I have comments that I'll give you guys before, that way you know. But are there any questions for Vivian, MPP?
I'm keeping on.
Will any of the materials change? Will you be providing additional materials for the next work session? Do you
We will
anticipate?
model results. We're not going to change anything.
Okay.
So, sorry, really quickly.
I just wanted to make sure we could go through the documents that we currently have.
So we're going to send out a new version of the project list because it was requested by Mr. Schutte, which is a really good request to put numbers next to each project so they're easier to see. So I think what I want to do is do that and get it back out to the committee members. So then when they're asking questions, they're like, well, what about project C1 or whatever it is, instead of like, well, this is too confusing. So other than that, nothing else should change on the project list.
What did you say?
Yeah,
I know you can write the numbers yourself, but we'll...
Well, no,
we'll do
it
for you.
does make it really, it does make it much easier. Well, and I know that I understand your hesitation, because then it gives the appearance that they've already been ranked, they've already been, like, that that's all set, but I don't know whether, like...
I'll put a note on there that says they are not ranked.
They're not ranked, they're just too, it's like S1
Yeah.
short term and L1 for long, I mean, yeah, Then if you do I1, then I looks like one.
Yeah. That's what I just said.
I know. You do Roman numeral, I know, exactly.
Use the Cyrillic alphabet.
I know.
And we talked about the notion that the ranking of the scoring of some of the projects might not be intuitive. And it actually made us laugh about one. We thought, how did it get ranked? But anyway, we would like to maybe make some recommendations. I mean, we can make some suggestions. But it's really up to you all to make those decisions. We do not want to do anything more than what we've already done in scoring them with our method and our process and the technical way we were doing it. We're trying not to interject our own personal thoughts.
So, Stephanie, as long as you're going to redo the pages anyway to put numbers on them, line numbers, project numbers, whatever. Remember there was that other question about why did this group that you never saw a score as high as these other groups because it was different scoring. I don't know if you need a footnote explaining that or not.
Oh, different scores between the
Is that
different
right?
modes.
Yeah, the difference between
Right.
motorized and non-motorized,
Right.
there's different rankings.
Right, so if there's a little legend that says, top score for this type of X, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out
Thought they
there.
hadn't been ranked yet.
Well, there was a comment about adding the scores too, so
They were on there.
they are.
They are.
All the scores
All
are
the way on the other side.
Yeah, they're all
They have been
default.
scored, it doesn't mean that they've been ranked. I mean, as far
Got
as
it.
prioritized.
There's some with the
Yes.
same score.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a certain point, the scores transition to being not the thing you look at, but whether it's in short-term, long-term, or illustrative. And we don't rank the projects within those
Yeah.
terms. So the first project you see is not the most important one. They're all equal at that point.
In the
So-
short term.
In the short term, sorry, within the short term. And so that's the kind of thing to think, that we have to explain that as in our next work session so people have a better idea of what that means.
Sometimes I'm like, should we just put them in alphabetical order?
Okay, can I-
Should we just like, I mean.
Everyone would name their projects AAA.
I know,
So they'd be
exactly.
still at the top.
So that's probably what we end up doing is alphabetical in there so people don't.
Backwards alphabetical the next year, no, can reverse them. Every year changes, that way they don't call it AAA.
So just for your information, we've checked with our modeling people, and we have enough money to do this one run and then the final modeling. So if we have to do if it comes up that we're requested to do any more modeling, we'll have to find another way to do that. And we've been talking about it amongst ourselves, and we're in the process of seeing what we can do. But
I thought if we did, they're gonna do 2 runs.
Well, 2 runs, this one and then the final one. 2.
You mean you thought we were going to do one as it is now and then another one with the Glen to Seward Highway?
That was my understanding.
Yes, I kind of,
At the work session, we talked about just modeling what the staff had and then coming back and seeing it, because the problem is we don't know what projects to move out to make room for the Seward to Glen Highway. That was never discussed at the work session. So staff making the assumption of, oh yeah, all these ones are going to move out first and then we're going to do the Seward to Glen. That's what we have to talk about at the next work session. So there really needs to be one more model run at the next work session, if we can, I hope that happens, we can actually have the decision, okay, these are the short-term, these are long-term and illustrative. We're gonna have to model that again and ask your guys' approval to release that to the public if it looks okay.
that's what I'm saying. We haven't funded that other model run.
And it becomes a problem because some people are probably going to be like, well, I want to see with these 3 or I want to see with these 4. We unfortunately don't have the time or the budget to do all that. So it's really, we have to get to the preferred alternative to release to the public to keep on schedule and budget.
But I can talk to the contractor, and we've asked them for a cost estimate for what it would be for model runs. So we're still trying.
It depends on how significant the project you were adding or removing is. It really does. I've done Transcad modeling. I mean, so it really does depend on the complexity of it. And that's the thing is the removal of the Seward to Glen project is complex and pretty significant.
Well,
So
it'll
trying
be
to do
interesting.
other ones may not be as difficult. I mean, it's you know, it's selecting certain corridors and modifying what their capacities are and doing, I mean, that sort of, I mean, some of the other ones may be more simple, but it's still time consuming.
But we did do a model run with just the Glen to Seward Highway project in the beginning. And that was the existing plus committed with just the Glen Highway?
No.
You keep saying no, but I think that's what it was.
It was the 2035 network
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the
with
2030.
the Seward to Glen.
But still, that's pretty big.
It was a comparison because we wanted to see what did the Seward and Glen do to the network at the time to see what kind of impacts it had. So,
And it was significant, but that's a lot if it's on top of the 2035 projects.
well, the 2035 included Seward to Glen in there. The thing is the 2035 called the Seward to Glen Tudor to Airport Heights. It's been shifted in our modeling to be Midtown congestion is Tudor to 20th and Seward to Glen is 20th to Airport Heights. So we have kind of different things now that we're talking about. When we say the model run we have that we're working on right now doesn't include Seward to Glen, it's only that portion from 20th to Airport Heights that's not included in the model run. The Midtown congestion is included in the model run.
Yeah.
So it's a different way of looking at things. And that's what we're trying to say is what does the network look like without that final piece in there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, frankly, I think it's going to be important to do that next model run before you all are comfortable with it. I really do. I'm going to do my best to talk to the consultant and see about wrangling one more out of for this.
Any other questions for David?
Any comments from the public? Okay. And then general information. Inside joke, sorry. So proposal regarding air quality advisory committee TAC.
So we've had a air quality advisory committee seat on this committee for quite a while. We have not had a person show up for probably 2 years now. The air quality advisory committee has not met in about that period of time. Dr.
been here?
Brown, he's DEC.
Oh,
Yeah,
This
he's
is
different.
our air quality advisory committee seat.
Oh,
for their
sorry.
purpose,
Yeah,
which is a
he
seat.
physically has not put a name tag out for.
And the committee is actually right there.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for
Yes.
it. Bottom line is,
We met him once.
we did meet him, he showed up at least twice.
Right, exactly.
But the challenge is that we used to be a non-attainment area, so the air quality committees met very often. When we changed to the limited maintenance area, they met not quite as often, and we've been doing that for a decade now, so we're close to a decade, so we're closing in on the next step, which is even less modeling required, fewer restrictions and fewer regulations that we have to follow related to air quality. So we have been down a committee member for this period of time. We have in years past been short of quorums. We haven't for a while, so we're kind of okay. But our suggestion has been, or the staff has been mulling this over for a while, trying to figure out what to do with that seat. And the suggestion that we have, which we'd like to bring forth next month, would be to change that seat to a Citizens Advisory Committee seat. So we have our constituted Citizens Advisory Committee. It's got a member from each assembly district, someone from J-Bear, someone from two different chamber commerces for Anchorage and Chugacking River, Federation and Community Council seat. So they're a little more regularly constituted committee. They do meet quarterly. And it would be nice to have a full board here, not have to worry about that, and also just to get a different sort of input. So I just wanted to let you folks know that we want to bring that next month. Of course, if you don't think that's a great idea, then we'll go back to the drawing board.
Is there any kind of regulation about who's supposed to be on the committee?
It is stipulated in our operating agreement right now, the makeup of the technical and the policy committees, and actually all the rest of the advisory committees.
That
So-
agreements with who and who?
What's that?
Yeah, who's in that?
The agreement is.
Parties to that agreement.
The parties to the agreement are the state of Alaska and the municipality of Anchorage. So the signatories are the governor and the mayor. We've done minor agreements to that creature along the way, but the last time it was signed was in 2001. So we haven't had a major change to that, constituting a redesignation by the FHWA, so we haven't had to redo this agreement.
But we have done changes. I mean, the Citizens Advisory Committee used to be the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we created
Right.
this.
And when that thing was first created, we didn't have a bike and ped committee, we didn't have a freight committee, we didn't have, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd like to bring that up next month. And if you don't like it, then we can bubble it up and see.
So why Citizens Advisory versus Freight Advisory versus UPAD versus, what was your thoughts?
The thought of the Citizens Advisory Committee is that if you look around the country, NPOs in general, the committee that they're most likely to have besides the required policy committee is a technical advisory committee. That's about 75% of the NPOs. The next most common one is the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we started with the Air Quality Advisory Committee for a long, long time, and that was the only other committee we had besides P&Z acting as our Citizens Advisory Committee. It is, in this case, a very active committee, and we like the idea that it blankets the bowl, it has someone from each district. It doesn't mean that it could be any one of those members be the seat on the TAC, but they seem to be very engaged, and it just is, it kind of suggests that the public will have a seat here at the table. Again, it is an advisory committee. This is an advisory committee, so the policy committee can make their decision however they want. But yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Do I understand that this change requires a update of the operating?
Yes. Yeah, so that's what we would
Long
bring.
process.
That's what we would bring. The process for updating our operating agreement is simply a recommendation by this committee and the policy committee approves. Because unless that's what I was answering to Ms. Walsh, is that unless we are redesignating the MPO in a different manner, it does not require signatures by the governor and the mayor. It is not a full change. It is just a minor amendment, just changing one line about the seat on the technical advisory committee instead of it saying the air quality advisory committee. And then we would delete, or we could delete, but we could just leave it like that, but we could delete the language about the air quality advisory committee. They haven't met in 2 years maybe?
At least.
Yeah. Nowadays, what we used to have to do is we would bring our air quality conformity analysis to them, they would chew on it, and then it would go to the committees. But now we do all we have to do is the interagency consultation team to make sure the TIP and the MTP meet air quality conformity standards, and that's it. So it doesn't need to go to them anymore.
Greg, do you need a motion to proceed on this?
No, this is just informational item. Next month, we'll bring you the official operating agreement.
Okay, would you, on your cover memo, just explain who the agreement gets sent to, who makes the change? How do you document that it happened?
This change for the operating agreement is just a minor amendment, so it would just be the policy committee's final approval.
questions.
Any comments on the phone? All right. Any other comments, committee comments for the good of the order? Ms. Walsh, you have one?
There's just so much going on. No, just so people stay aware, there is on the purchasing website right now an advance notice of intent to issue an invitation to bid for the petroleum cement terminal. For the 2020 piece of that, the terminal and the trestle out to a platform where the ships pull up to. This would be to build the trestle part. The entire thing is designed, but current funding only allows to go, to build that piece. And the idea is recognizing the terrible shape of the existing petroleum cement terminal. This is the first one we expect to drop out of service because of not being able to support the loads. We feel like it's important to build what we can of the design, and in the meantime, try to secure the funding for the second piece of it. The original idea for that was by this time there would be, some additional state money or federal money or somewhere, and that did not materialize. And so the next step was, all right, we need to raise the rates so the customers, have to pay for this, and customers are adamantly opposed to paying additional rates. And that brings the issue that has fostered the issue with the Assembly and the Enterprise Committee. There's a special Enterprise Committee meeting tomorrow to talk about what shall we do. Well, what we should do is raise the rates and pay for the thing, but they didn't ask me personally. So anyway, just to let you know that is out there, and if within the next 10 days or so, we expect to issue the actual invitation to bid. The reason I point you to the purchasing website is the entire project library is there. And if you ever wondered what it's going to look like, it's all there. The geotechnical reports, the full design is all out there. So that's what's going on with the port. It is we do have a couple of grants requests out there. Anything we can do to try to make at least this petroleum cement terminal happen, because we are very much playing a gamble every time we walk out onto the petroleum cement terminal dock, actually. So one hit by a ship, one earthquake that lasts longer than 30 seconds, it's toast. And so it's real, it's true. We have an updated report from R&M. The structural engineers who are the most expert on our dock, and their words are, it's imperative that a replacement for PCT, for petroleum UL1, be constructed as soon as practical, and we believe it is on the edge of support. According to all ASCE codes and standards, we should have shut it down long before now. So that's the reality. So, letting you guys know, you're all citizens, you all shop, drive, all those things. You need to pay attention to this, because putting our head in the sand is not solving the problem. There you go.
What if we implemented a cement tax? So one load of cement from every truckload or every cargo ship
goes
put
into
the building.
Show up tomorrow. Mr. Chris Constance wants everyone's ideas, so.
Nothing will happen.
Yeah, it's at, the Enterprise Committee tomorrow is at 11 o'clock at room 155 in Hill Building, not Hill Building, City Hall, dating myself, the Hill Building. So yeah, that's 11 to 12:30, and tomorrow the menu of the day is the port stakeholders are going to talk about why, or have been invited to give their opinion. The last one was engineers from engineers with that kind of experience, what they thought about the design that the competition did. So imagine how those go. Yeah. So it's important. And for those who don't know, what boggles me is that the port is not considered eligible for any type of transportation funding in the U.S. projects, although we are actually on the NHS. We are the terminus of the NHS here in town. So, but we're still, for whatever reason, there's some interpretation of some piece in the Federal Register that says, nah, we can't get this money anymore. So that's too bad. Thank you for the soapbox. I shall now step down.
So I guess my committee comment is just that every year we have an annual construction meeting that gets together all of the bodies, MOA, DOT, utilities, and any construction work that is going to be happening that year, discusses the projects that are going to be happening. And it has been scheduled for Thursday, April 18th, from 2 to 4 p.m. And right now they're asking for everybody to submit their data to Steve Schmidt by Friday, March 29th, to get all the information on the project map. So any agencies, I know that it's been sent to all the agencies, but just kind of giving that follow-up. I know that there's, my recommendation, I asked Charles when he sent the message, just to try to, we want to know everything as far as, there's lots of special projects I know related to earthquake damage, the regular scheduled season, and then things that show up each minute. So be prepared for an interesting spring. Everybody else, that was more my caveat, is pay attention, and if you happen to see, please report potholes, and if you see something that appears to be a sinkhole, that's my concern, is more the sinkholes that may be popping up. Let somebody know. I mean, really, I'm the person who reported the sloughing of Dowling Road because I'm the one that I drove across it and noticed that the road was starting to dip, and I knew there was a failure occurring in it, and I'm the one that called it in, and sure enough, street maintenance went out there and was like, yeah, we have a problem. So if you see something, say something, call it in. I think both street maintenance, I think both DOT and the municipality would rather know than not know, so they can go out there and make sure it's not a major failure that's going to turn into a sinkhole that will swallow a car. So
We're doing a extensive, we're already programmed money to look at all the on-port storm drains that are supporting all those trucks and all those parking areas, because we're concerned about connections pulling apart at storm drains or at manholes or catch basins or whatever, and we don't know what we have. We've had some failures already. Controls of like a petroleum valve isn't getting the information from the ship or the pumps where the ship's unloading because conduit pulled apart. And these are things you just don't know until
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Stephanie, I just wanted to add, one of the things that had been missing in years past, and that we had picked up at DOT, we picked up on the last couple of years, are the pavement preservation projects aren't typically considered as construction projects at large, and they've been overlooked in past iterations. In the last couple of years, we've done a better job of making sure those were included, and might be, but just throw a suggestion out to double check with your own maintenance.
If you submit them, we'll put them on the map.
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is we've been submitting them the last couple of iterations. I'm just wanting to just kind of put it out there that should be a consideration for MOA as well.
We don't do pavement preservation projects.
You don't?
Not internally. They do minor repaves, but they can't do it anymore because of, So it's a long story. But if it's a project, it's a project, and it's added to the list. I mean, even the small, if they're doing, It's a long story. But yes.
Before we meet again, gravel train will be running. So to support all your projects that you want to pave and do fix potholes and all that other stuff. And so we will be doing our daily piss everybody off of Someone's got to do it.
Can I put that in there?
Did you get that?
I have to tell you, I have not received nearly as many angry phone calls about that, because we get those phone calls too, since the Dowling extension. Because of people coming down C Street and they see the backed up, people divert and go the other way.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's.
It's better than it used to be.
And it doesn't bother me, because it doesn't impact me. Yeah. Jim?
A couple of quick comments. Tudor Road, we got the new girder in last weekend. They're working on the deck right now. The completion date's 31 March, so they should have the bridge at Tudor and New Sewer all fixed up by the end of the month. Highland, that's Artillery Road. It's a pavement preservation that should be going out here pretty soon. We're having a little bit of trouble at headquarters getting that project development authority for sure. But, they're working on it. So
What does pavement preservation mean versus resurfacing?
That's their terminology
Kind of the
for
same
it.
thing.
It's the same thing.
Weight restrictions are going on Monday. It's 100% not always sucks. It's 100% for Anchorage. Yeah, it's really early. Everything's thought out.
Really late.
He gets work like that.
Yes.
Talk about this last year. Anyway, a notice went out yesterday, so it goes into full effect on Monday. So if your folks are moving heavy stuff, they better get on it. AMATS is still no restrictions yet. It's pretty well locked up still. I'll give you that one.
Wow, that's, what's a regular time usually?
April.
Well, no, it usually starts about mid-March, but it's dependent every year on the weather.
Homer's completely shut down.
The whole southern peninsula is completely done already.
So, earthquakes, we had 163 sites. We added another 10 yesterday. We're expecting as the ground melts, all that frozen bridging action type things are going to go.
Yep.
So my pool says 20% increase in the number of projects. Everything's thought out, but we'll see. But yeah, like you said, if you notice things, please let us know.
It was breaks, I guess, it was crazy.
Yes.
Some breaks.
Yeah, they're all over the place. So
Is
we've
there-
got 2 zones we declared. Anchorage kind of proper is zone 2, I believe it is. I got the numbers. Zone 1 is everything not Anchorage. So that's a rural primarily. Anchorage is not.
I know.
Oh my God.
British
Alaska, I know.
I had to make it up. Anyway, HDR is going to do all the not Anchorage stuff, and Stantec's doing all the Anchorage stuff. So I saw those folks today and said, hey, we fixed it in 3 days. Let's take it. So, more to follow. But we already have consultants on board, and the goal obviously is a 2-year clock. We got to get all this stuff pretty well. But so more to follow on that. We did get a 60-day extension. Normally everything's 100% eligible up for 180 days. Feds gave us an extra 60 on top of that because of winter time conditions, so we can capture all that time. So that pushed us out to the June. Take a look at it, guys. So definitely let us know before the I think I said it last month, but I didn't see the notes. Dave Kemp's leaving at the end of April. He's actually retiring. So if you want to see Dave Kemp, he'll be running a charter boat out of Whittier. Lazy Otter or something.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have issues with Dave Kemp, you can go charter Lazy Otter. Charter Lazy Otter.
They have great sweatshirts.
This summer. Say hi. Already opened up construction for Sterling 58 to 79 down there by Cooper Landing, so that's going already. So they're patching that up. It's a little rough, so bear with us until the asphalt plants come online. 75 to 90 down at the Portage is still going strong. They've been working on the bridges, and they are actively enforcing double traffic fines. That guy walked in yesterday with an $800 ticket. We're going 55 and a 35. So he's making some money down there. I caution that you don't attribute to that. So they are serious about their law enforcement. DOT just wrapped up our renegotiations for our overhead rates. We call them cap rates with the feds. We went from 3.8 to 5.39, 5.38. We had a big snafu at the accounting level on our ICAP. So we had a $26 million hole a few months ago. So they've allowed us to go back retroactively to July 1. But it may involve municipality of Anchorage thingies, so just be aware. And that rate is valid with FAA as well as FHWA.
So July 1 of
18.
Get more blood out of it.
That's pushing hard. What's that? That's almost.
what did you say it went to?
We went from 3.7 to it's 5.39 or 5.38. They're going to release the official. We're meeting tomorrow, and because now we got to go back and figure out what we can get out of it. Anyway, last thing, we sat down with the municipality makers planning, and we're making a few tweaks to the memorandum of understanding regarding how DOT coordinates with the municipality of Anchorage regarding project development. There's not any big monster changes. The broad brush of it is that typically we run our new construction or reconstruction, we call them 4 Rs, through Planning and Zoning and Urban Design Commission, as well as the technical review. The 3R projects, which are more rehabilitation projects or pavement preservation projects, we're not obligated to go through Planning and Zoning or Urban Design. But we still go through a technical review on those. We've added a new category called non-standard project development. And basically what that was meant to capture is things like earthquake projects and design builds like the southbound, northbound Glen Highway. Because of those timelines, it's not a real good fit for us to go through planning and zoning and urban design, just so they can ask for sprinklers, just so Park and Recs can say no, just so. So we're asking for a little bit of an exception. We will still coordinate with the municipality, but not necessarily go through the planning and zoning ordinance. So small tweaks, but that is all that is it's fit to print.
When the asphalt plants will be online?
It should be firing up here.
Usually, yeah.
Are there any that service Anchorage and Matsu besides Quap and Denali?
Bruce has one.
AS&G and, doesn't Massax have one?
Yeah.
Massax is out
AS&G
in,
distributes.
They got an
In
asphalt.
We have, there's three of them here in town.
Where's Massax?
Where's their plant?
their pit out in McLuhan.
Well, the pit's out there.
And I think that's where their asphalt plant is out there.
Going to get a visit?
Stay tuned for more next budget.
Any other committee comments?
One last question about, you were talking about if you see something, say something. I'm curious about Glen Highway northbound on the Eagle River Bridge. There's a WOW that affects mostly the furthest left lane. I'm wondering if there's any plan to smooth that out.
So that was one of the original earthquake sites we were at that first week.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back and reassess and rebuild, retweak all those sites.
That's happening
Yeah,
this
Mirror Lake,
summer?
Slope Feather site, International Airport, Road Interchange, all those are going to be readdressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are just temporary fixes.
I assumed it was going to get more attention.
All right.
I got one comment.
Yes.
So we have heard from our federal partners, tentatively our federal certification will be April 10th through the 13th. So it'll be just before the TAC meeting next month. So they'll come up, do the certification and stay through the TAC to just give a quick preliminary report. John Laurie, Ned Conroy from FTA, someone from, anyway.
You're trying to do this fall?
This is it.
That or?
Our training.
Oh, you're trying.
Yeah. Any public comments? Hearing none, then we are adjourned.
I did.
I think would be the right size project to put into that. So we're asking for a little bit of like a range of projects from like 150 to 250.
You just hear it?
Total cost.
Is that what it is? Like